Okay, so get ready because today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the book of Revelation, and specifically that mysterious passage about the 144,000 sealed.
Yeah.
And to help guide us through all of this, we're going to be using a YouTube video by Elias Lopez.
Oh, interesting.
And he is Jewish, which I think is going to bring a really interesting perspective to this whole conversation.
I agree. I think
that's not a perspective you hear very often when talking about the book of Revelation.
Yeah, exactly. And, the 144,000 are,
right.
There's such a mystery.
Yeah. They really are kind of a theological puzzle.
Yeah.
Piece in Christian thought, right? I mean, they're often seen as like this elite group.
Right.
This group that's chosen by God for a really crucial role.
Right.
When things kind of go south.
Yeah, exactly. And what's so interesting to me is that Eliezer dives into interpretations.
Yeah.
That you'd usually hear in certain Christian and Messianic Jewish circles.
Right.
And he doesn't claim to have like all the answers.
Yeah. But presents a couple of really fascinating theories about who these 144,000 might be.
Right. And he does it all with like a real intellectual humility.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's jump into it. Let's get to the good stuff.
Fair.
Theory number 1.
Okay.
Eliezer connects the 144,000 to ultra-Orthodox Jewish students.
Interesting.
What do you think about that?
I mean, it's a thought-provoking connection.
Right.
If you think about the lifestyle of these communities, like they're intensely devoted to religious study, often separated from the secular world.
Right.
It's easy to see,
I see where he's
coming from with that.
Yeah. And he even draws a parallel to the verse in Revelation that describes the 144,000 as virgins. And he's suggesting that it could be a metaphor for their separation from worldly influences, their purity of focus on religious life.
Oh, that's an interesting interpretation. I mean, and it really raises some interesting questions too.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about spiritual purity,
right,
like what does that even mean in today's world?
Yeah.
Are we talking about like isolation from the world? Or is there like a different way to think about it?
Yeah, it definitely makes you stop and think about the different layers of meaning within these ancient texts.
Definitely.
But hold on, because then Eliezer throws us a curveball.
Go.
With his second theory.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
Hit me.
So he brings up this concept of a spiritual Israel.
Spiritual Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole other...
That's a whole other rabbit hole to explore.
Can of worms right there.
I know.
Yeah.
So break that down for us. What exactly does spiritual Israel mean?
So essentially the idea is that belief in Jesus, regardless of like your background, it kind of grafts you into this spiritual lineage that's tied to Israel.
Gotcha.
So this theory basically opens up the possibility that the 144,000 could be comprised of both Jewish and Gentile believers.
So it's not about bloodlines, but about a shared faith of a spiritual connection that transcends ethnicity.
Yeah, it adds another layer of complexity to this whole question of who the 144,000 represent.
Yeah.
Are they a literal group?
Right.
Or are they a symbolic representation of something bigger?
Yeah. And the best part is Eliezer doesn't claim to have it all figured out.
Right.
He's upfront about wrestling with these different interpretations, which I think is incredibly refreshing.
I agree. It's like he's saying, hey, let's dive into this together and see where it takes us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but before we go too far down the rabbit hole, let's pause here for a second and really unpack what these two theories imply. What do they tell us about how different groups interpret these ancient prophecies?
Yeah, it really is fascinating, isn't it? You have these interpretations that on the surface, they seem like they're worlds apart.
Right.
But they both tap into this yearning to understand like where we fit in, the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. It's like both theories are trying to grapple with this idea of a chosen people.
Right.
But they're approaching it in different angles.
Yeah. And that raises a really interesting question.
Yeah.
What makes somebody chosen?
Right.
In a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Is it about lineage? Is it about behavior? Is it about belief?
Right.
Or is it maybe about something else entirely?
Okay. Now you've got me thinking. Because if we kind of step back from these specific interpretations for a moment, there's like a bigger question here about the role of prophecy and what it means for individuals, do we look for ourselves in these ancient texts? Or are they pointing to something beyond our individual lives?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
Right.
But I think what we can do is we can look at how these prophecies have been interpreted throughout history. You know, because the way that people understand these concepts, a lot of times it reflects their own cultural context and the challenges that they're facing in their own lives.
Okay, so let's get practical for a second. Let's say somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I'm not an ultra-Orthodox student, and I don't necessarily subscribe to this idea of a spiritual Israel. Where do I fit into this whole 144,000 thing? What would you say to them?
I would say that the real value in exploring these concepts isn't about finding your literal spot in a prophetic lineup.
Gotcha.
It's more about asking yourself, like, what kind of qualities would make someone worthy of being considered a part of this chosen group?
So it's less about the specific number and more about the underlying message of spiritual readiness. Or
exactly. If we look at the descriptions of the 144,000, in Revelation, they're often portrayed as being blameless, pure, and completely devoted to God. And these are qualities that I think resonate across different faiths and different belief systems. It would point to a certain kind of spiritual integrity and unwavering faith.
That's a powerful message. And it seems particularly relevant in today's world.
I think so too.
Where there's so much noise and distraction. Maybe the idea of a chosen few, regardless of how you interpret it, serves as a reminder to focus on those core values of faithfulness and devotion.
And it's not just about individual piety either. You know, a lot of scholars see the 144,000 as representing this idea of a righteous remnant, a small group of people who hold fast to their beliefs, even when facing adversity. And ultimately, they help to bring about positive change.
So it's about individual spiritual growth, but also about the potential for collective action that's inspired by faith.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that even if the world seems chaotic or corrupt, there's always a possibility for renewal and hope. And that hope a lot of times begins with a small group of people who are committed to living out their values and inspiring others to do the same.
Now, that's a message that really resonates. And it takes this whole discussion beyond a purely theological debate and into the realm of personal responsibility. And social change.
Absolutely.
This is incredible.
It is.
We've gone from deciphering ancient prophecies to talking about modern social change.
I know.
Because of this one video about the 144,000 talk about a deep dive.
This is why I love exploring these topics.
You
just never know where they're going to lead you. Or what kind of unexpected connections you might find along the way.
For sure.
It's about being open to the journey and embracing the mystery.
It's amazing how this one concept, like the 144,000, it can open up so many different avenues.
It really can.
Of thought. And, you know, it's a real testament to how these ancient texts, they can still speak to us today. Even if we're not approaching them from a strictly religious perspective.
Totally. And you know what really struck me about Eliezer's video? Was that he really embraces the ambiguity of it all. You know? Like, he points out that, you know, people in the comments are debating different interpretations. But he doesn't present it as a bad thing.
He kind of frames it as like part of the journey,
It's not about finding the definitive answer.
It's about the discussion. It's about wrestling with the ideas. Exactly. And that's something I think we could all benefit from. A little more intellectual humility and a willingness to listen to perspectives that might differ from our own.
Especially when it comes to these big existential questions.
I think that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. It's like we're not just learning facts. We're exploring different ways of thinking about our place in the universe, the meaning of faith, the possibility of positive change.
I think it all circles back to that idea of personal responsibility too. You know, whether or not you believe in the literal interpretation of the 144,000, I think there's something really powerful about striving to embody those qualities of purity, devotion, and steadfastness.
It's like a call to action, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be the change we want to see in the world. To be part of that righteous remnant.
Right.
However you define it.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive.
I'm left with a sense of hope and a renewed sense of purpose.
That's great.
It's like we've unearthed this treasure trove of wisdom hidden within these ancient texts. And now it's up to us to figure out how to apply it to our own lives.
Well said. You know, it's not about blindly accepting dogma. It's about taking those ancient sparks of wisdom and using them to ignite our own inner fire to be the best versions of ourselves. Both for our own benefit and for the good of the world around us.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. So to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep exploring. Keep questioning and keep diving deep into those topics that spark your curiosity.
Absolutely.
And ignite your soul until next time.
Take care, everybody.